Okay, here's a thought to start us off. What if the very things that define our modern world, like, say, the company that makes your phone or the nation you belong to, even the idea of human rights, what if they don't actually exist outside of our collective imagination?
That definitely sounds a bit wild, doesn't it?
It
But
does.
it's such a profound question. It really gets right to the heart of what makes Homo sapiens, well, us. It's not just some philosophical exercise, you know.
Not at all. It's
I mean,
key to understanding our history and maybe even our future.
absolutely.
I agree completely. So, today on the deep dive, we're embarking on a journey into something called the cognitive revolution and collective fictions.
Sounds intriguing.
Our mission really is to unpack that pivotal moment in Sapiens history, the moment when a fundamental shift in thinking and communication transformed us from, well, just another primate species into the dominant force on Earth.
And the core idea, as you hinted, is that it all boils down to our unique ability to believe in shared stories, sometimes quite astonishing stories.
Exactly. And we've got some fascinating source material to guide us through this deep dive, offering insights into exactly how this profound transformation unfolded.
Excellent. Where should we begin?
So let's set the scene. If we rewind the clock, say 150,000 to maybe 70,000 years ago, our early sapiens ancestors are living in East Africa.
Right.
They looked just like us, anatomically modern, brains the same size as ours. But here's where it gets really interesting. Their cognitive abilities seem, surprisingly limited.
Yeah, they weren't exactly building skyscrapers or inventing the internet back then, and not even close. Their tools were pretty basic, their social structures likely simple.
It's stark, really. I mean, around 100,000 years ago, some of these early sapiens actually ventured north into the Levant, that's roughly modern-day Israel, Lebanon,
Mhm.
and they clashed with Neanderthals who were already living there. And guess what?
They lost.
They lost. They actually retreated, leaving the Neanderthals as the masters of that region for a long, long time.
That's incredible. And it strongly suggests that their internal brain structure, even if the skull size was the same, it wasn't quite wired like ours is today.
Right. You couldn't, like, teach those early sapiens English or explain the theory of evolution. They wouldn't grasp it.
And equally, we'd probably have a very hard time understanding their language or their worldview. It was likely much simpler, more grounded in immediate reality.
It paints a picture of a species that, frankly, wasn't particularly special yet, just one of several human species milling about.
Exactly. So the big question is, how did we get from that to us, to dominating the planet?
Because something truly dramatic happened. Between roughly 70,000 and 30,000 years ago, this is what we call the cognitive revolution.
And it wasn't a slow, gradual shift. The evidence points to something more like an explosion.
Totally. Sapiens leave Africa for a second time, but this time, it's different. They don't just win against other human species like Neanderthals. They basically drive them right off the face of the Earth.
They spread incredibly rapidly into Europe, East Asia, and then, this is just amazing, they somehow managed to cross the open sea to Australia. About 45,000 years ago.
Think about that. Crossing open water with no compass, no maps, just rudimentary boats, and presumably a story convincing enough to get people to take that risk.
The audacity is mind-blowing.
Mm.
And this whole era, it's just a kaleidoscope of innovation. Suddenly, we see the invention of boats, oil lamps, bows and arrows, even needles.
Needles,
Oh,
which
yeah.
meant tailored, warm clothing, huge advantage in colder climate.
Absolutely. And then there's the art. For the first time, reliable, unambiguous art appears, like that incredible statal lion man carving half human, half lion. What does that mean?
It suggests abstract thought, mythology, maybe religion.
Exactly. And alongside the art, we see the first clear evidence of religion, commerce, long-distance trade, and social stratification. Different roles, maybe hierarchies.
It's just this unprecedented burst of ingenuity, like you said, as if someone flipped a switch.
So what flipped it? What researchers think caused this sudden dramatic shift?
Well, the most widely accepted theory, though still debated, points towards accidental genetic mutations.
Right, sometimes called the tree of knowledge mutation. The idea is that these random genetic changes essentially rewired the sapiens' brain.
And it wasn't just a guess. The archaeological record seems to back this up, showing that sudden explosion of symbolic thought and complex behavior rather than a slow buildup.
Yeah, it suggests a neurological leap. And here's the really crucial part. If you could somehow meet a sapiens from this era, say 40,000 years ago,
The person who carved that lion man, maybe?
precisely, you could absolutely learn their language and they could learn yours. You could chat about, I don't know, the weather, your families, maybe even philosophy. Their brains were fundamentally like ours.
Okay, so the hardware, the brain, gets this crucial upgrade,
Right.
which leads to a new kind of language. But what was so special about this language? Because, I mean, animals communicate, right? My dog tells me very clearly when he wants dinner.
Huh. Right. Our language wasn't the first language. Not by a long shot. Animals, even insects like bees and ants, communicate incredibly sophisticated information.
Like the bee dance telling others where the nectar is.
Exactly. Or think about green monkeys. They have distinct alarm calls. One sound means careful, an eagle. A different sound means careful, a lion.
That's pretty specific.
It is. So our advantage wasn't just having vocal cords. Parrots can mimic sounds, even speak words. The difference was what we could communicate with our new language abilities.
Okay, so what was the breakthrough? What could we do that the monkeys couldn't?
Well, there are a couple of leading theories. The first one is that our language became incredibly supple, incredibly flexible.
Supple. How so?
Think about it. We can take a relatively limited number of sounds phones and combine them in near infinite ways to create words and sentences with specific meanings.
Okay.
This allows us to ingest, store, and communicate a truly prodigious amount of information about the world around us.
Right, so back to the monkey versus human example.
Exactly. The green monkey can yell, "Careful! A lion!" Which is useful, obviously, Survival 101.
Definitely.
But a human, using this supple language, can say something much more complex, like, "I saw a lion down by the river bend, the big one with the scar, tracking a herd of bison this morning. Maybe we should go around the other way or set an ambush."
Ah, okay. That allows for group discussion, strategy, planning.
Precisely.
Mm.
A huge leap in collaborative information sharing about the external world. Very practical.
That makes a lot of sense as a survival advantage. But there's another theory, isn't there? One that's maybe a bit more amusing.
There is indeed. It's famously called the gossip theory.
Gossip.
Yes. And while it sounds maybe a bit frivolous, like a joke,
Hmm.
numerous studies actually support it. The core idea is that our language primarily evolved not just to talk about lions and rivers, but to share information about other humans.
You mean like who's reliable, who's cheating, who's sleeping with whom?
Exactly that. For a highly social animal like sapiens, living in increasingly larger groups, knowing the social landscape who could be trusted, who was a freeloader, who held alliances, was absolutely critical for survival and reproduction.
It sounds cynical, but yeah, I can see that being incredibly important.
And you know what? Even today, if you actually analyze the content of emails, phone calls, newspaper columns, casual conversations, what is most of it?
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's gossip. Who did what? Who said what?
A vast majority.
Yeah.
We are inherently fascinated by information about other people. So this theory suggests our language evolved to facilitate that.
Okay, so being able to share reliable gossip helped build trust and cooperation.
Precisely. It allowed small bands to expand, to develop more sophisticated cooperation, because you had a mechanism for knowing who was trustworthy, even if you hadn't interacted with them directly yourself.
All right.
Someone you do trust could vouch for them or warn you about them.
Okay, that makes sense. Sharing information about the world, sharing information about each other. But then we get to the truly unique feature, right? The one that really sets sapiens apart.
Yes, this is arguably the most profound aspect of the cognitive revolution. It's not just our ability to talk about things that are real lions, friends, enemies, but our unique ability to transmit information about things that do not exist at all.
Things that don't exist. Like what?
Well, careful. A lion. That's real. With the lion is the guardian spirit of our tribe.
Ah, okay. The lion isn't just a physical threat anymore. It's a symbol, a concept, a spirit.
Exactly. That ability to speak about fictions, legends, myths, gods, spirits, that is what enabled sapiens to do something absolutely unprecedented in the animal kingdom.
Which was?
Cooperate flexibly in massive numbers, far beyond the limits of personal acquaintance or even gossip networks.
Cooperate flexibly in large numbers.
Think about it this way. Ants and bees can work together in huge numbers, millions even. But their cooperation is incredibly rigid. It's mostly genetic, hardwired. They can't suddenly decide to, overthrow the queen and establish a republic.
Right, no ant revolutions.
Not spontaneously, no. Then you have animals like wolves or chimpanzees. They cooperate much more flexibly than ants. They strategize, they form alliances, but they can only do it in small, intimate groups, usually a few dozen individuals who know each other personally.
Okay, so rigid cooperation in large numbers for insects, flexible cooperation but only in small numbers for chimps.
And then there's sapiens. Thanks to our ability to believe in shared fictions, We can cooperate in extremely flexible ways with countless strangers, people we've never met, people we'll never meet.
And that, you're saying, is why sapiens rule the world.
That's the argument. It's our superpower, if you will. This ability to unite millions of strangers around a common myth or story.
You can really see the limitations in other species, like our closest relatives, the chimpanzees.
Absolutely. Chimp troops rely entirely on intimate, personal knowledge. Constant grooming, hugging, building relationships, knowing who owes whom a favor.
And that limits their group size, right?
Dramatically. They usually top out around 20 to 50 individuals, maybe rarely up to 100. But beyond that, the social order just destabilizes. Too many strangers, too much uncertainty, too much conflict. They simply can't maintain cohesion if they don't know each other personally.
And it's likely that early humans, before the cognitive revolution, faced similar constraints. Imagine a valley fertile enough to feed 500 archaic sapiens.
They probably still couldn't live together effectively. How would they organize? How would they resolve disputes without knowing everyone? It would be chaos.
So gossip helped push that boundary out a bit.
It did. Gossip allows you to know about people you haven't met directly. But even gossip has its limits. Sociological research actually suggests there's a kind of natural group size bonded by gossip.
What's the number?
It's famously around 150 individuals, often called Dunbar's number.
Right, I've heard of that.
Below this threshold, communities, businesses, even military units can often function pretty well based on personal acquaintance and reputation on gossip, essentially, without needing formal ranks, titles, written laws.
Think of a small startup or a close-knit village. Everyone kind of knows everyone else's business.
Exactly. But once you try to scale beyond 150,
Hmm.
things start to break down. You need more structure. You can't keep track of everyone personally.
So this is the critical question then. How did sapiens ever cross that 150-person threshold? How did we manage to build cities with thousands, empires with millions?
This was humanity's first great social ceiling. And the ingenious key, the breakthrough that shattered that ceiling, was the appearance of fiction. Shared myths.
Shared myths. How does that work?
Large numbers of strangers can cooperate successfully if they all believe in the same common myths, the same stories. Think about huge institutions.
Okay, like what?
Like churches. They're rooted in common religious myths. Two Catholics who have never met, maybe live on different continents, can still embark on a crusade together or pool resources to build a hospital because they share belief in God, Christ, the saints.
Right. Or states, nations.
Exactly. States are rooted in common national myths. Two Serbs who are complete strangers might risk their lives for each other in a war because they both believe in the existence and importance of the Serbian nation, its history, its destiny, shared stories.
And judicial systems, too.
Definitely. Judicial systems rely on common legal myths. Two lawyers who've never met before can work together intensely on a case, defending a stranger, because they both believe in abstract concepts like laws, justice, human rights, and, let's be honest, the existence and value of money for their fees.
Ha! Fair point. But that leads to a really profound takeaway, doesn't it? The point that might make you really stop and think.
Which is that none of these things, gods, nations, money, human rights laws, justice, none of them exist out there in the physical universe like rivers or trees.
They exist only where?
Only in the stories that people invent and tell one another. Only in our collective imagination. There are no gods floating in the cosmos, no inherent nationness in a piece of land, no intrinsic value in a piece of paper money.
It's all a collective agreement, a shared belief.
It's quite striking when you really internalize it. And it means that modern business people, lawyers, economists, in a way, they're like powerful sorcerers.
A sorcerer?
Well, they weave tales that are arguably even stranger and more powerful than the myths told by ancient tribal shamans. Let's take the legend of Peugeot as a case study.
Peugeot. Okay, the car company. Big French brand.
Huge. Employs hundreds of thousands of people globally, produces millions of cars, earns billions of euros. Started out as a small family bicycle business, actually, back in the 19th century.
Right, so it's real. Factories, cars, people.
Ah, but is Peugeot SA, the company itself, the legal entity, real in the same way? Can you point to it? You can point to a factory, an executive, a car. But where is the company?
Good question.
Right.
Just an idea, a legal construct.
Exactly. It's a figment of our collective imagination. A legal fiction, as lawyers call it. Think about this. If, heaven forbid, every single Peugeot factory burned down tomorrow, and every employee quit, and every car rusted away,
The company, Peugeot SA, would still exist.
it absolutely would. It could borrow money, hire new people, build new factories. It owns things. It can sue and be sued. It pays taxes. It only ceases to exist if a judge, following specific legal rituals, declares it dissolved.
Wow. It's completely separate from the physical assets or the people.
Completely. And this invention, the limited liability company, was one of humanity's most ingenious creations. It utterly transformed the economy.
How so? What was it like before?
Well, imagine you're a craftsman in, say, 13th century France.
Hmm.
You make wagons. If one of your wagons breaks down and injures someone, you are sued personally.
Right, because you're the business.
Exactly. If you borrow money to expand and the business fails, your creditors can take your house, your tools, everything you own, maybe even throw you in debtor's prison. The risk was enormous.
That must have really stifled entrepreneurship. People would be terrified to take big risks.
Precisely. Starting a business could ruin your entire family for generations. But the limited liability company changed that. The company itself is liable, not the owners personally, beyond their investment.
So the owner's personal assets are protected if the company goes bust?
Correct. It's legally independent. Armand Peugeot created his company back in 1896. How? Not by physically building something, but by paying a lawyer.
To do what?
To follow a specific set of legal rituals. Fill out forms, sign documents, pay fees, publish notices. Much like a priest performing a baptism or a mass. The lawyer followed the correct legal spells, and poof, a new entity, Peugeot SA, was incorporated. It sprang into existence purely within our shared legal imagination.
It really is like a kind of magic based on collective belief.
It is, and the truly incredible power here. It isn't just telling these stories. Lots of people can tell stories. The hard part is convincing millions, even billions of people to believe them.
But when that belief takes hold,
Then it grants sapiens immense power. Power to cooperate on vast scales, power to undertake huge projects, power to take risks that no single individual could ever manage alone.
now it's important to clarify, right? An imagined reality like Peugeot isn't the same as a lie.
No, definitely not. A lie is when you, the liar, know something isn't true, but you try to convince someone else it is, like saying there's a lion nearby when there isn't, just to scare someone away from a tasty banana. Even monkeys can lie.
So how is an imagined reality different?
An imagined reality is something everyone involved believes in, or at least acts as if they believe in it. Its power persists as long as that communal belief holds.
So when the UN demands that a country respect human rights, nobody is lying, even though the UN, the country, and human rights themselves are all fundamentally constructs of our imagination.
Exactly. They are powerful imagined realities that shape behavior, because millions agree to treat them as real. So, ever since the cognitive revolution, you could say sapiens have lived in a kind of dual reality.
Full reality.
Yeah. There's the objective reality of rivers, trees, mountains, lions, things that exist independently of our beliefs. And then there's the imagined reality of gods, nations, money, corporations, human rights.
And the really mind-bending part.
Is that over time, this imagined reality has become incredibly powerful. So powerful, in fact, that today, the very survival of the objective reality, the rivers, trees, lions, often depends entirely on the entities within the imagined reality, like states and corporations and international agreements.
That's wow. That our shared fictions now dictate the fate of the physical world. What's also fascinating about this ability to create imagined realities is how it changed the pace of change for humans.
Yes. It allowed sapiens to change behaviors, social structures, and patterns of cooperation incredibly rapidly. It essentially created a fast lane of cultural evolution.
Bypassing this super slow lane of genetic evolution.
Exactly. Think about other animals.
Oh.
Chimpanzees have their alpha-male hierarchies, right? That's largely hardwired by their genes. They can't just hold a meeting and decide, you know what, let's try an egalitarian democracy this year.
Huh. No chimp referendums.
Right. And even archaic humans, before the cognitive revolution, their pace of change was glacial, driven mostly by slow genetic mutations or maybe environmental shifts. Look at Homo erectus stone tools.
What about them?
They remained largely the same, almost unchanged, for nearly 2 million years. Can you imagine that kind of stasis in human society today?
2 million years. It's almost inconceivable compared to how fast things change now.
But sapiens, after the cognitive revolution, could completely transform their social structures, their political systems, their economic activities, their beliefs, sometimes within a generation or two, all without any significant genetic alteration.
Can you give an example?
Sure, think about something like the Catholic priesthood. It's an elite group, historically very powerful, composed of individuals who voluntarily choose celibacy. They don't pass on their genes.
Right, that completely defies natural selection, biologically speaking.
Totally. How does this childless elite persist and wield influence for centuries? Through stories, through shared belief in Catholic doctrine, passed on culturally, not genetically.
Or think about, say, a Berlin resident born in 1900.
Good example. They could have lived through the German Empire, the Weimar Republic, Nazi Germany, Communist East Germany, and finally, reunified democratic Germany. 5 radically different sociopolitical systems.
All within one lifetime, and their DNA remained exactly the same throughout.
Precisely. It was culture, beliefs, imagined realities that were changing, not biology. This cultural adaptability was a massive advantage.
So going back to the Sapiens versus Neanderthal encounters.
While a single Neanderthal might have been physically stronger, maybe better adapted to the cold, and could perhaps win a one-on-one fight,
A group of 500 versatile sapiens able to cooperate flexibly based on shared myths and rapidly invent new strategies.
could easily overcome, outmaneuver, and ultimately displace 50 static Neanderthals who couldn't coordinate in such large numbers or adapt their social patterns quickly. The Neanderthals simply couldn't compose and revise complex shared stories about tribal spirits or future plans.
And we actually see some indirect archaeological evidence for these cognitive differences beyond just who survived.
We do. Look at trade networks. Sapiens archaeological sites from this era often show material sourced from hundreds of kilometers away. Seashells from the Mediterranean found deep in mainland Europe, for example. Obsidian tools in New Ireland made from rock quarried 400 kilometers away.
That implies complex trade networks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But Neanderthal sites, they generally lack this kind of evidence. They mostly use local materials. It suggests they didn't have the same capacity for long-distance cooperation and trust.
Because trade ultimately relies on trust, which is often rooted in shared fictions, like belief in the value of currency or shared rules, or maybe even common gods blessing the exchange.
Exactly. Trusting strangers hundreds of kilometers away requires some kind of shared imagined reality. You also see hints of it in hunting techniques.
How so?
Neanderthals seem to have typically hunted alone or in very small family groups, relying on ambushes or close-quarters combat. Powerful, but limited in scale.
Whereas sapiens.
Sapiens, around this time, developed techniques for mass slaughter, coordinating dozens of hunters, sometimes even multiple bands working together to surround entire herds of animals or drive them off cliffs or into narrow gorges for easy killing.
That requires incredible communication, planning, and trust among a large group.
Immense amounts.
Yeah.
50 Neanderthals, stuck in their small group patterns, were simply no match in the long run for 500 versatile, innovatively cooperating sapiens who could share a plan based on a story.
Okay, so let's try and summarize the impact of this cognitive revolution. It gave us several new abilities.
Right. First, the ability to transmit much more detailed information about the objective world, lions, rivers, plants, tools. This allowed for complex actions, better planning, like coordinating that sophisticated hunt.
Okay.
Second, the ability to transmit more information about social relationships, the gossip theory. This allowed for larger, more cohesive groups, expanding cooperation up to that natural limit of about 150 individuals.
And the third, the really unique one.
The ability to transmit information about things that don't exist objectively. Things like tribal spirits, nations, limited liability companies, human rights.
And this third ability had two major consequences.
Exactly. First, it enabled cooperation between truly vast numbers of strangers, shattering the 150-person ceiling. And second, it allowed for unprecedentedly rapid innovation in social behavior cultural evolution.
So this is why we say that cultures, which are basically these diverse imagined realities sapiens invented, and history, the story of how these cultures change, sort of declare their independence from biology.
Precisely. From the cognitive revolution onwards, you can't fully understand sapiens just by looking at our genes and hormones. You absolutely have to consider the evolution of our ideas, our myths, our shared fictions, our imagined realities.
It's humbling in a way to remember that individually, one-on-one, a sapiens isn't that different from a chimpanzee. We're not necessarily smarter in every single way.
No, individually we are, as the source material puts it, maybe embarrassingly similar. The truly significant difference, the chasm, only opens up when we cross that 150 individual threshold and start operating in large groups.
Try putting 1,000 chimps in Times Square or Tiananmen Square.
Absolute pandemonium. Chaos.
Right.
But sapiens, we gather by the thousands, millions even, in such places all the time. We create incredibly complex, usually orderly patterns. Think of trade networks, mass celebrations, political institutions.
All thanks to that mythical glue, the shared stories that bind us together.
That's what makes us, in a sense, masters of creation. Our collective ability, fueled by fiction, is what's truly remarkable. It's not necessarily that our hands got much more dexterous after the cognitive revolution.
A single person could make a flint spearhead before and after.
Right. But think about what it takes to make a nuclear warhead, or even just a smartphone.
It requires the coordinated cooperation of millions of strangers across the globe. Miners, engineers, factory workers, software developers, logistics experts, marketers.
All working together, most never meeting, bound by contracts, money, corporate structures, laws, all imagined realities. Our capacity for cooperation improved dramatically, far more than our individual tool-making skills.
So biology, in a sense, sets the stage. It provides the physical and cognitive potential, the arena.
Exactly. Biology defines the playing field. But Sapiens, using our unique ability to invent and believe in fictions, started creating incredibly complex and ever-changing games within that arena.
Themes like capitalism, democracy, religion, science.
All these systems of cooperation based on shared rules and beliefs. So to truly understand us, to understand human history, you can't just describe the biological arena. You have to describe the historical evolution of the games we play within it.
It really does change how you view, well, everything.
It certainly makes you see the world differently.
Yeah. We've really come full circle then from the initial question, demonstrating that this power of collective fiction, it isn't just about quaint old myths or gods.
No, it's about the fundamental mechanism that allowed us to cooperate on a scale no other species can even approach. It shapes everything around us, from the economy to politics to our deepest values.
So maybe a final thought for you, listening. Just take a moment to consider how many imagined realities govern your daily life.
Yeah, think about the money in your wallet or bank account, just pieces of paper or data bits given value by collective belief. Think about the nation you belong to, the laws you follow, the company you might work for.
How much of what we consider solid and real is actually a story we collectively agree to believe in? And what are the implications of wielding that incredible reality-shaping power?
And maybe even push it further. What new collective fictions might we be creating right now, maybe unconsciously, that will define the future of humanity? What stories will the next generations live by?
A truly mind-bending thing to ponder.